Sundered Doctrine is here very soon, and with its release, Contest Mode offering an exclusive emblem and a guaranteed dungeon exotic drop, which may save you many weeks of RNG hell. But Contest Mode is no easy task, shown by how long it took teams to clear Atrax in the previous dungeon. Especially those who did not use the res cheese strat, you know who you are. So here's all you can do to make sure you and your fire team are as prepared as possible going into it. This video will focus mainly on Titan, as well as some general weapons and gear tips. Warlogs and Hunters, I'll be doing separate videos for you shortly afterwards. First thing though, it's a new season, so an all new artifact, and as usual this will be incredibly influential on the meta. This time it benefits strand, void and dark abilities and weapons the most, so I'll be favouring builds which utilise these somewhat. But also you do need these perks unlocked in the first place, so be sure to do some kind of bounty prepping. I know there's less than a week left at this point, so don't stress about it too much, just grab as many as possible, even if it ends up being repeatable bounties. Having anything in the bounty slot is better than nothing. Even if you don't prep, you can still do the weekly challenges post reset for pretty big chunks of XP. But anyway, on to what really matters. Which weapons should you be bringing with you? I've got two sets here. First, a more generic set, and also weapons which will be useful for Titans specifically. For your Titans, chances are in boss encounters you will be on tractor cannon duty, since a lot of Titans damage comes from melees and other abilities, which means you can bring this almost required debuff option. The only time I would not bother with having a tractor cannon, at least on standby, is if you are running with a tether hunter, but even then it's easier to get constant uptime with the tractor cannon. Another Titan exclusive weapon set which could come in clutch is SMGs with Peacekeepers. For this you want an SMG with a huge mag size to make the most out of the damage boost provided. The three best options for this are the Yarovit or Parabellum with deconstruct and rewind, or prolonged engagement with 4th times and target lock. Any of these options can get you a super with a single mag, and this will serve as a great backup damage option after you've expended all special and heavy ammo, as there is no limit to how much you can use these. You could also swap exotics to Synthoceps, Cuirass, Star Eaters, anything of that like, in order to make your supers all that more powerful. Also having Rake Angle or another glaive is an excellent choice. Not only do glaives have some seasonal artifact buffs, but I have previously found these great for the following reason. You can use them as a primarily melee and block option pre-damage phase, and then swap to a GL or sniper for boss damage. Because you do not need to expend special ammo for meleeing or blocking, you will have full special ammo for your DPS setups. This is a strat I used for Atrax in the previous dungeon to great effect, and to the absolute surprise of nobody, Consecration Titan is still going to be really good. A weapon which pairs with this nicely is Parasite. Stacks are built up easily with ability kills, and then you launch the worm at any enemy you don't like the look of to delete it instantly. For more general weapons, the first one I will recommend is hopefully a surprise to nobody, the VS Velocity Baton. If at least 1 to 2 of your fire team are not using this, you are basically throwing. Not only is the attrition orbs role just broken for orb generation, but being a void weapon it gains a bunch of artifact synergy too, and I really recommend using these following mods. Volatile Marksman, which can provide volatile rounds, Maligned Harvest, which can cause weaken following volatile, and Void Flux, which can apply volatile following weaken. So you can see with these 3 mods you can create a self-sustaining loop of volatility and weaken. Depending on the effectiveness of Volatile Marksman, these stabilising rounds might not be required on any void weapon despite its recent buff. But in the case of Baton, I probably wouldn't give up attrition orbs regardless. The only downside of Baton is the damage numbers from multiple of these do not stack. So while it is incredible, having everyone running this weapon simultaneously will not be as effective. And on that, if you are not running Baton, then Choir of One is actually another incredible option. All of the listed void benefits apply here too. And this weapon is very adaptable between ad clear and boss damage. Of course this will take up your exotic slot, but is really the only consideration you have to make. If you don't have your exotic slot devoted to something else, just run Choir. This is boss dependent, but if close range is an option, also keep Legend of Acrius around. The consistent damage this can output is great, especially if you have a full team running it. It's also incredibly easy to use, just melee per 3 hits and reload per shot as the low fire rate allows for this. If the boss is long range, this might be a bit of a cope, but depending on the efficiency of particle reconstruct, linears might actually be more viable. Queenbreak has been changed to a burst mode linear with increasing RPM, so potentially strong. Scintillation is the best legendary burst fire, and Euphony will also be very strong in longer DPS phases. Of course, if you are not a linear believer or particle reconstruct turns out to be pretty low of a boost, heavy GLs are still the go-to when it comes to boss DPS. Hopefully you've picked up the shield inhibitor from Banshee with Envious and Bait and Switch, as this will still be the best option going into this dungeon. Finally for weapons, a few things I recommend just keeping on your character because these are all fantastic workhorse type weapons. Tinasha's Mastery because it's the best in slot kinetic rocket sidearm. Arc Conductor Ergo as this is still the best add clear weapon in the game. Especially good if enemies are using arc damage too, as it will give you a 50% resist. Lost Signal as this is the only kinetic slot area denial frame, which is also really good for building up Dark Transcendent energy quickly. Outbreak Perfected as kind of a last resort DPS option, but it also builds up super quickly if being an SMG range is not an option. Microcosm because this is a dread dungeon. If there's a subjugator boss, the microcosm will deal heavily increased damage and will probably be worth using. And finally Anarchy because it's consistent easy damage, and is an even better choice if you're using special ammo and abilities more so for DPS. For builds, the default is still going to be Prismatic Titan with Knockout and Consecration, probably with Glacial Quake as a super. I am very aware Consecration has been nerfed with a net damage loss of around 25% when the ignition damage is factored in, but don't write this off as an option just because it's nerfed. The question should be, is this build still 25% better than the next best option, and yeah, it probably is. The setup I am showing on screen is what I will be using for roam encounters with the default weapon setup of Tinasha's, Baton and Tractor Cannon. If I need a bit more range damage, the Tractor can be swapped out for Microcosm, or even Anarchy. The class item used here is Hoyle and Synthoceps. There is also a PK variant of this build I will be using, and here's the setup for that one. This one's more of a hybrid of boss DPS and roam, losing out on melee damage but gaining a lot more super uptime and weapon damage. The high mag SMG is preferred for boss damage, while I'd probably use Huckleberry for roam. If I want to use Prismatic entirely for boss damage, I'll use something like this. Note that you can loadout swap from the roam to the boss DPS, as all aspects and fragments remain the same. The only consideration has to be super. Glacial Quake is the best option as long as the enemies allow for it, meaning the boss is big and grounded. Otherwise, a Cuirass and Thunder Crash option may be preferred. If a boss has multiple adds surrounding it during damage phase, which I could see being quite likely, Cuirass is particularly potent as meleeing these enemies will allow for multiple super activations per damage phase. Strand Titan is another huge consideration. Because of the dominating power of Consecration, people have forgot quite how good Banner 4 is. It is survivability and damage all in one, and the Strand setup is not much change from how it used to be. Unlike the Prismatic setups, with this one I think a 1-2 punch shotgun is 100% worth having, as it will work great with Frenzied Blades and Grapple Melee. The Navigator Grapple Melee spam tactic will work, but I will kind of caution using this in a day 1 environment. It's a bit too high risk on the risk versus rewards balance. What I would however use is the Artifact Mod Disruptor Spike. This makes Sever more effective at lowering an enemy's damage output, and Frenzied Blade severs on each hit. This could be the difference between living or not, so be sure to have it on at all times. Another huge boost for Strand is the roaming super change. Blade Fury is actually really good for both roam and boss DPS, as long as Synthoceps are used, and this will be active so much more frequently now. Finally, this is a kind of it depends setup, but one I could see working really great. The Arc Aspect Storm's Keep will give Titans a much more weapon focused DPS setup, ramping up Bolt Charge for you and your fire team of standing behind a barricade. I could see this setup pairing really well with a Well of Radiance Warlock, and just beaming the boss as a fire team. The big factor here though is how are these Bolt Charges built. If it's just on hit, then Microcosm gains a lot of potency here, or any other higher RPM weapon. If it's based on damage dealt, a traditional heavy GL or rocket dump will work just fine. Cloud Strike and Thunderlord are both being updated to passively build Bolt Charges too, but I'm not sure if that will make them worth using. And to keep barricades active as much as possible, a Hoyle setup could work here, as this improves ability cooldown across the board and also allows for stronger pulse grenades to be spammed, which was already a pretty good part of Arc Titan's kit. The Cuirass swap could also be used here. So that's the lot for Titans. If there's anything I have forgotten, leave it in the comments. There's also some new equipment coming with this episode, such as the Healing Frame Strand Auto. Don't really want to comment on this here because I need to try it out first, but if it is anything game changing, I'll try to upload about it before the dungeon drops. Thank you for watching.